A monk asked of Master Sosan, "Please sprinkle the compassion of your teaching so that I may be liberated." "Who has put you under restraint?" asked the master. "No one." Master Sosan said, "Why then do you ask to be liberated?" At this, the monk awakened fully. This is quite a well-known exchange, and it involves the third Chinese patriarch, Master Sosan, who, if we remember, Bodhidharma is the first Chinese patriarch. Then it was Eka, who was the second patriarch. If we remember, he was the one that stood outside the cave and chopped off his right arm and presented it, and then asked Bodhidharma to pacify his heart because his heart was not at rest, and Bodhidharma told him to go and find the heart and bring it to him. He was unable to do so, and then Bodhidharma exclaimed, "There, I've pacified your heart," and that brought him to full awakening, Eka to full awakening. So Master Sosan was a pupil of Eka, or Hui Ke, to use his Chinese name. And according to tradition, ascribed to Master Sosan is a long poem that's called On Faith in the Heart, which contains his wisdom and his insight, or elucidates his wisdom and insight, and is available in translation in a number of places. And it's a very lovely poem as well. And it's the one that starts, "The great way is not difficult, it merely avoids picking and choosing." So this is the same Chinese master, we're using his Japanese name, Master Sosan. And in this exchange, a monk comes up to him and asks him, "Please sprinkle the compassion of your teaching so that I may be liberated." And of course, liberation is something that's talked of much in Buddhism. The Buddha talks about coming and liberating all beings. The Bodhisattva vow is the vow to liberate all beings from oppression. From the oppression of what, though? And that is what we are looking at today. So it reminds us, actually, because this does take us back to the story of the Buddha himself. If we remember that curious birth story of the Buddha, we know that his mother, Queen Maya, was on her way to a place of confinement. And she was caught short in the Lumbini Gardens when she went into labor. And it's said that surrounded by her handmaidens, holding onto a tree with her right hand, that the baby Buddha emerged from her right side miraculously, and taking 7 steps in each of the 4 cardinal directions, pointing one hand to heaven and one to earth, declared, "Between heaven and earth, I alone am the world-honored one." This is obviously a miraculous birth. It's also a symbolic birth as well. We don't take these things literally, of course. We are being shown an image here, and we have to look a little bit deeply into it. And if we ask ourselves, who this baby Buddha is, well, he indeed is, amongst many things, he has this potential. He's the seed of, which exists in all of us, liberation. And he takes these 7 steps in each of the 4 directions, because he shows that he can go in any direction on earth. There's nowhere that he cannot go. And so this points a little bit to what is it then that puts us under restraint? Because after all, that's what the master asks the monk when he comes and asks for liberation. What is it that actually puts us under restraint? And of course, well, if we look at it, if we look at things, there's some nice, 1 or 2 sort of quite nice stories that we can tell in connection with this. Because actually, if we ask ourselves, do we feel under restraint? Well, or oppressed from time to time? Well, I'm sure that we say yes, we do. We find that aspects of our lives put us under restraint. But what it might be that we feel sort of trapped with a mortgage, or we feel trapped in a relationship, or trapped in a job, that I'm not where I would like to be, all this sort of thing as well. And, we can begin to feel quite depressed and pessimistic about these things. We can feel trapped by our moods as well. We can feel trapped by our thinking too. If we're overly anxious, and we suffer as a consequence of that. But what we don't always recognize is that the attitude we take towards our lives also conditions that sense of feeling oppressed by things. Of course, we can be in very difficult circumstances, genuinely difficult circumstances, but there's also a degree to which we contribute to that, either exacerbating something that's unpleasant or actually creating something that simply isn't there in the first place. And I remember many years ago, just as an example, when I went on the first retreat or Zen session. It's a 5-day session. It was difficult. It was held at a little Catholic priory, which the group I am with had been going to for many, many, many years. It was a silent retreat. There's no books. We didn't have iPhones in those days. There was no distractions at all. There was 8 or 9 hours sitting meditation a day. It was psychologically and physically, it was pretty tough, hard work. And I knew it was going to be, and this was the first one I'd been on. And in fact, there were so many people staying that I wasn't able to stay in a bedroom because there were too many of us. So half a dozen of us slept in the Zendo, in the meditation hall. And as a result, we had a little room downstairs, a sitting room for ourselves that we could stow our stuff in, and we could sit there quietly if we wished, in lieu of a bedroom. And although these things were very tough and there was a lot of privation, all the distractions were cut off. We can't go and make a cup of tea or coffee when we fancy it. No TV, no radio, nothing, no talking even. We were fed well. The nuns looked after us very, very well indeed, and there's plenty of food, so we don't starve. And I remember after one lunchtime, I can't remember if it was on the second or third day, I walked into that little living room, into that small sitting room, and just as I walked in, out of the corner of my eye, I saw that there was someone sitting in a chair in the corner of the room. And as I came in, he suddenly moved as if to hide something. And I looked at him, obviously, to see what it was he was hiding. And when he saw I was no one of any real importance, he relaxed, and out he brought a Cadbury's Whisper chocolate bar. And he proceeded to eat it. And it was one of those moments when you look into somebody's face, somebody's eyes, and you know what they're thinking because you yourself have been in that place. And what he was thinking was, this session is really tough. We have all these privations, we have all these things that we can't do. And I just need something just to carry me through, just a little treat, a little indulgence that for me that I can have. And I knew that feeling because at the time I smoked, and that's exactly how I used to use cigarettes on the session as well. If it was tough, then I would sort of think, okay, another half hour to go, and then I can have a cigarette. Or if we'd had a break, I'd rush out and have a quick cigarette, thinking that'll just give me some strength to sit through the next 90 minutes or something like that. So I knew that feeling exactly. And of course, this chap had, one Whisper bar for one chocolate bar for each day that he was going to be at the retreat. And, it's a small thing. It's not a matter of it being right or wrong, although that sort of thing normally is not done on a retreat. You don't have stores of food. Really, what's most important is looking at why I feel I need those things. Because what would have happened, if he'd gone to his bag on the following day and those 2 Whisper bars weren't there? Say he'd miscalculated. I don't know, maybe somebody had pinched them. Maybe they'd simply vanished into thin air. But it doesn't matter how, but what happens when that does happen? Because that does really happen in our lives. There are times when when we set those boundaries up for ourselves, I say, I can't do this, or I won't do that, um, I, I can't sit through that sort of TV program, or, I must have 2 cups of coffee in the morning in order to face the world. And I tell myself that, and this is then who I actually become. But the truth is that, in fact, our resilience, our natural inborn resilience, may be far greater than we possibly imagine. But the problem is that by convincing ourselves with this self-talk that I don't do meetings without 2 cups of coffee in the morning, I don't do um, going to see the uncle or the auntie who I don't get on terribly well with because it's too, they annoy me, then I'm actually creating a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, something that is means that I can't go there. It creates no-go areas. It's a little bit like if we imagine that our life is a city, and that there are areas that you don't go into, and that's that, and you never question it. It's just that something that I don't want to do unless I'm really forced. And if I am forced into doing it, or if those whisper bars do suddenly disappear, then I fall apart, and create a tantrum, because I really cannot face it. These no-go areas are the areas that the baby Buddha holds the potential, who has the potential for liberation, can go. That's what those 7 steps in the 4 directions means. He can go into every no-go area. There's an interesting passage from Master Rinzai, um, where he's actually quoting from scripture, but he talks about the man of the way. This is someone who has now attained to this liberation of the heart, liberation from the picking and choosing, from the wanting and not wanting of I. And he says that he can go into the desert without being molested by wild animals. He can go into fire without being burned. He can play in the 3 deepest hells, as if they were a fairground, which may sound rather callous, because obviously there's lots of being suffering in the deepest hells. However, what this is really pointing to, and again, we don't take these things literally, but what it's pointing to is exactly this, that these places, these unwelcoming and fearful places as they are to me, threatening as they are to me, are not threatening to one whose heart is not encumbered by this picking and choosing. And again, we remember these are the first 2 lines, after all, of Master Sosan's poem on faith in the heart. The great way is not difficult, it merely avoids picking and choosing. That picking and choosing which is what I do. And I am those picking and choosings. It's sort of interesting if we were asked to say who we are. I don't know. There's all these sort of dating sites now, and you can say who you are, and my name is this, and my job is this, and then we just go on to a long stream of what I like and what I don't like. My favourite food is, my hobbies are, favourite music, favourite films, pet hates, all that, my wish list, the things I want to do before I die, achieving my full potential, which means this. These are all my picking and choosing. And of course, it's not essentially that there's anything wrong with it. But if I identify with it, if it becomes I must or I am nothing, or I must or I die, then we are oppressed by it. This is then putting us under restraint. So what puts us under restraint, of course, are these attachments to these likes and dislikes, is precisely my picking and choosing anyway, which is why we practice restraint, which is why at sessions, at retreats, for example, you cut off 1 or 2 little things, um, like talking, for example, or reading, and so forth. And we really begin to find where those sticky attachments are. I've seen it myself, we get bored. When we get bored, we get restless. So even in the breaks, when we're sitting around. I remember many a sunny day at the retreat centre, at the monastery, and people would be wandering about and wandering about and wandering about, never able to settle because they felt bored, because they couldn't distract themselves with the usual distractions. Or the other thing that people would do, you catch people in front of notice boards, reading every single notice that's there. Ordinarily, the person would have walked straight past that, not interested in anything that's there. But with the lack of any other distraction, even reading, something about a church bazaar that has nothing to do with oneself and one will never go to, becomes at least something that I can distract myself with. There's a real paucity there. There's a real poverty of being able to just stay with oneself in that quiet without having to seek out those distractions. Really, what a pity that we are so ill at ease in our own company, that we constantly have to try and escape from myself. And perhaps nothing brings this more immediately uh, to mind than when we're faced with a chore, a household chore, that I really dislike. It could be the ironing, could be the washing up, could be the mowing the lawn, uh, cleaning the car, whatever it might be. There's always some pet hate that I don't, put it off to the last minute. If it's the ironing, then I'll begrudgingly iron one shirt at a time, rather than doing the whole laundry. Spending an hour or hour and a half at it, just do it. Um, I'll begrudgingly do it at the very last minute when I absolutely have to. And the other thing then that I do when I absolutely have to is I distract myself. Whilst I'm doing it, I'll listen to the radio or watch TV or have a conversation. Really, what I'm doing is, if the body, maybe if the body has to do this ironing, obviously, um, but I don't have to be there whilst it happens. I can distract myself with a TV program or a podcast, even maybe even on the Buddha Dharma. Why don't I go and hear a nice podcast about Buddhist practice, about being at one with what we're being done? Yes, whilst I'm doing the ironing, or whatever it might be. Interesting how we do this. It's quite important to see those motivations, particularly when we're distracting ourselves. There's a lot of picking and choosing when we begin to investigate that. And uh, uh, when we find that, then it's quite useful when we've identified such a chore. It's quite useful then to do something about it, to just experiment with it. Now, this is something that we can try. We don't have to say to ourselves, right, oh God, I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life. No, this is an experiment to show a principle, to show this principle of being oppressed by and then finding liberation from. Because after all, our extract for today, when Master Sosan says, "Who puts you under restraint?" And the monk replies, "No one." Where does that "no one" come from? Because there already we have a change of heart. If he said, "Please liberate me," and then when he's actually asked, "No one," then maybe that answer doesn't come straight back. It might well be, and I suspect this is the case here, that when Master Sosan said, "Who puts you under restraint?" the monk didn't immediately reply. The monk actually went away and looked to see who is putting him under restraint. In other words, he stayed concentrated and with the problem until such a time that he began to feel under constraint about something or other. And then when that constraint arose, he looked to see who or what was putting him under restraint. So our experiment can be this. If there's a task, a chore that I really don't like, then put a time aside to do it. Make a diary note that at this day and on this time we're going to do this job, and there'll be no excuses. There'll be no shifting, putting something else in its place accidentally. we're actually going to do this job. And then when it comes to it, now be prepared, because as that time comes, there will be a feeling of, oh, I really don't. That's what we're after. That's the restraint. That's the no-go area that's now emerging. And what we do is we use the body before thinking, or before we can create excuses, create reasons and rationales. We jump right into it. We use the body, and if necessary, get a little bit angry with oneself. That really invigorates and can break us out of an inertia. And the second thing, obviously, no distractions. No, those usual distractions, no. And when we are doing the job, put vigor into it. Don't let it be half-hearted or lackadaisical or sort of, slumped over it. So even though we're doing it, actually every cell in our body is screaming, get me out of here. If that starts happening, again, get a little bit angry, and then seize hold of that energy, seize hold of that vigor, and put it right into the task at hand with some real vigor. And just do that task and do it until it's completed. And once it's completed, then we can put everything away, sit down for a moment, and just reflect back on the experience of doing it. Was it the same as when I usually do it, begrudgingly? Or did it actually feel different? Was there some essential quality of the experience that was different doing it this particular time? Can we then, rather like this monk, come back and say to Master Sosan, no one puts under restraint. When we do this, no one is putting us under restraint. And then, of course, Master Sosan said, why then do you ask to be liberated? Why do you ask to be liberated? And at this, the monk awakened fully. The monk awakened because he saw the general picture. He saw the general picture that, in fact, these periods of restraint, or these periods of constraint, as they appear, actually are being self-created. They're being self-created because of my sticky attachment, because I judge this as boring, because I judge this as uninteresting, because I judge this as irrelevant to me, because I judge this as something that I really don't want to do. This is what puts me under constraint. If we jump, if we use the body, and which is why we do use the body so much in Zen, if we really jump into it, then actually we jump out off that wheel for that moment, and we are liberated from it. We are at one with it. There is a going with it, a oneness. This is what's called samadhi, to use the Sanskrit term, which means that we are joined together. The doer and the doing are joined together. And in that joining together, that feeling of I falls away, is forgotten. And there's a real rolling with it. As one of the Mahayana Sutras says, the heart rolls with the 10,000 things. That rolling is truly mysterious. Because in that rolling, in that going with it, who or what is doing it in the absence of I? Who or what is actually doing the doing? Something else that we can really look into, that has resonance for the rest of our lives as well. And there's something else that comes out of this, of course, which we've talked of before, and this is most important. This is really where we go from something that's basically psychological into something that's truly spiritual and truly religious. And that is that in that I-less state, in that state of no I, when that feeling of I and the task to be done has fallen off, has been forgotten, then something is there. There's a reciprocity. Again, as Venerable Myokyoni used to like to say, I look at the flower and the flower looks at me. And at the end of that task, it's not even as if um, whatever it is that we've done, the washing up, the drying, the putting away, the wiping down the side, the washing, the drying the car, maybe the bit of waxing as well, or the ironing, or that bit of darning, or whatever it is that, or the hoovering, or what needed to be done. When we look, when we have finished the task and we come up from it, so to speak, and we look at it, isn't there a feeling of like, thank you, from whatever it is that we've helped, the car, the kitchen, the living room, whatever it actually is. It almost shines. There's almost an illumination with it, and one cannot say whether it's in oneself or in the things itself. It doesn't seem to quite be outside or inside. It's just there. But there's this reciprocity. There's now a relationship between ourselves and our surroundings. Instead of these things being done resentfully, instead of wishing these bits of life away, we are living them fully. And a consequence of that being joined up is that feeling of alienation, which so many people suffer from these days, is assuaged and gone for a time. And even though, of course, the root of I goes very deeply, and we very quickly come back to my complaining self, we've discovered something. We really have discovered something, and it's only a matter of making a small effort just to enter that place once more. Okay, we'll leave it there.